The declaration. The message arrived on a lazy Sunday afternoon, interrupting Earth's global administrator Eleni Kostas during her grandchild's birthday party. 2,000 years of peace had made such interruptions rare enough that her aide actually apologized before forwarding the priority communication. "I'm sorry, Administrator, but the Deep Space Network just picked up a transmission. They're saying it's urgent." The aide's voice held a curious note Eleni hadn't heard before, something between confusion and suppressed laughter. Eleni excused herself from the gathering in her Sydney garden home, the sounds of children's laughter fading as she stepped into her office. The spring breeze carried the scent of jasmine through the open windows as she activated her terminal. The message appeared as a holographic projection, featuring an alien being she'd never seen before. Its scales shimmered iridescent purple under harsh lighting, 4 arms crossed in what she assumed was a formal posture. When it spoke, its voice rumbled with gravitational authority. "People of Earth and her colonies, I am Supreme Warlord Kaz Tech of the Veltrax Dominion. After observing your expansion into the stars for 3 centuries, we can no longer tolerate your infringement upon territories destined for our rightful conquest. By ancient right and cosmic decree, I hereby formally declare war upon the entirety of humanity. Prepare your fleets, muster your armies. You have 1 standard rotation of your homeworld to formally acknowledge this declaration, after which we shall commence hostilities according to the sacred combat protocols of the 16th Dominion expansion. Victory or death." The message ended, replaced by a detailed document specifying proper response protocols, battle formations, and surrender ceremonies. Eleni stared at the screen, her hand covering her mouth. After a moment, she realized she was not suppressing horror. She was suppressing laughter. "Verification," she asked her system. "The message originates from the edge of the Ta-CD system, Administrator. Unknown vessel configuration, but advanced propulsion and energy signatures detected. Species designation unknown." Eleni sighed, watching her grandchild through the window as the child gleefully chased soap bubbles across the lawn. War. The concept was so foreign to modern humanity that most people only encountered it in historical dramas or anthropological studies. The United Earth government hadn't maintained anything resembling a military for over 1,500 years. "Connect me with the council, please," she said, smoothing her casual attire, and wishing she'd worn something more formal today. Within 30 minutes, the Emergency Response Council had assembled virtually. Representatives from Earth, Mars, the Jupiter Collective, and the 12 exoplanet colonies appearing as holograms in Eleni's suddenly too small office. "I sent you all the message," she began. "Thoughts?" Dr. Maya Wong, head of Sinological Studies at the University of Mars, was the first to respond. Her hologram leaned forward, eyes bright with fascination rather than fear. "This is absolutely fascinating. The Veltrax, if that's truly their name, appear to operate under ritualized warfare protocols. The document they've attached outlines specific formations, communication frequencies, even the proper angles for approaching battle. It's like they're following some kind of cosmic sporting regulation. But they're serious," asked Colony Administrator Adebayo from Proxima Centauri. "Oh, deadly serious, I believe," Maya replied, her excitement undiminished. "Their culture appears to be structured entirely around combat as both necessity and art form. The translation matrix suggests their language contains 47 distinct terms for different types of conquest." Giancarlo Esposito, the infrastructure coordinator for the Jupiter Collective, cleared his throat. "I feel I should point out the obvious. We have no warships. We have no weapons. The last armed conflict between humans ended nearly 2 millennia ago." Laughter rippled through the virtual assembly. "What exactly are we supposed to fight them with?" asked Shen Yuzuki from the Alpha Centauri colony. "Should I ask our museum curator to dust off the ancient projectile weapons exhibit?" More laughter, though Eleni noted it held an undercurrent of genuine concern. "Actually," interjected Dr. Wong, "this presents a unique opportunity. The Veltrax clearly expect us to respond according to their cultural framework. Their entire message presupposes that we organize ourselves along similar militaristic lines. Eleni nodded. So they've never encountered a post-war civilization before. Exactly. This is first contact with a species that evolved along entirely different social structures than humanity, Maya continued. From an anthropological perspective, it's the discovery of the millennium. That's wonderful for your research papers, Dr. Adebayo said dryly. But how do we respond to a declaration of war when we're fundamentally incapable of waging one? Silence fell over the assembly as they contemplated the question. Humanity had spent centuries developing arts, philosophy, exploration, and cooperative technologies. The concept of organizing for mutual destruction had become as foreign as communicating through smoke signals. Eleni stood up, her decision made. We respond with honesty and an open hand. Dr. Wong, I'd like you to lead a first contact delegation. We'll send our fastest ship to meet them at the edge of Ta City. Without weapons? Asked Shen. We haven't needed weapons in 2,000 years. I don't see why we'd start now. Eleni replied. We'll bring cultural artifacts, scientific knowledge, and an invitation to dialogue. And if they attack? Giancarlo asked, voicing the concern that hung in the air. Eleni smiled. Then we demonstrate that humanity found better solutions to conflict long ago. The Harmony of Worlds, Earth's premier diplomatic vessel, departed orbital dock 12 hours later. Dr. Maya Wong led a team of 15 specialists, linguists, anthropologists, historians, and cultural experts, on what she had enthusiastically dubbed the most important cross-cultural misunderstanding in human history. The ship itself was a marvel of human ingenuity, capable of near-light travel through the manipulation of space-time rather than brute force propulsion. Its elegant design prioritized comfort, scientific research, and the showcase of human artistic achievements. Weaponry had never been considered in its construction. As they approached the coordinates specified in the Veltrax message, Maya gathered her team in the observation lounge. Through the transparent dome above them, stars shimmered against the void. Remember, she instructed, we're dealing with a culture that views conflict as fundamental to existence. They literally cannot conceive of a society that has moved beyond warfare. Our goal is not to mock or dismiss their values, but to demonstrate that alternatives exist. Lai Chen, the team's senior linguist, raised his hand. The language analysis suggests their hierarchy is strictly maintained through combat prowess. They may interpret our lack of military posturing as weakness rather than advancement. An excellent point, Maya nodded, which is why we need to demonstrate strength, just not the kind they're expecting. The ship's AI interrupted. Contact detected. Vessel approaching at sublight velocity. Configuration matches sender of the war declaration. The lounge's display activated, showing an approaching vessel that resembled nothing so much as an ancient earth mace, a central sphere bristling with what appeared to be weapon systems and sensor arrays. They're hailing us, the AI reported. Open a channel, Maya responded, straightening her posture. The image of Supreme Warlord Kaztsek appeared, even more imposing than in the recorded message. His scales shifted color slightly as he observed them, secondary eyelids blinking horizontally across 4 yellow eyes. Human vessel, the alien commander rumbled. You approach in violation of combat protocols. Where is your battle fleet? Our sensors detect no weapon systems, no defense screens, no honor guard. Explain this insult. Maya stepped forward with a warm smile. Supreme Warlord Kaztek, I am Dr. Maya Wong of Earth. We come in peace and friendship to discuss your message. We bring no weapons because humanity abandoned warfare many centuries ago. The alien scales darkened to a deep purple. Impossible. No species achieves spaceflight without the crucible of war. You attempt deception. No deception, Supreme Warlord. Merely a different path. We would be honored to meet with you and share our histories. Perhaps we have much to learn from each other. The alien commander stared at them, mandibles clicking in what might have been confusion or rage. After a long moment, he responded, "Your behavior does not conform to any known species protocol. We require verification of your claims. Prepare to receive a boarding party for inspection." The transmission ended abruptly. Historian Jamal Washington leaned toward Maya. "That went interestingly." "Indeed," she replied with a grin. "They're curious. That's a start. And if they decide to attack?" Lai asked quietly. Maya's expression remained confident. "Then we demonstrate that 2,000 years of peace hasn't made humanity any less resourceful." 6 armored Veltrax warriors materialized in the Harmony's reception area, weapons drawn and postures aggressive. Their scales shifted through patterns of blue and purple as they scanned the unarmed welcome committee consisting of Maya and 3 colleagues. The lead warrior, distinguished by elaborate markings on his armor, addressed them in a growling voice. "I am First Blade Vexmore. We will inspect your vessel for hidden armaments and warrior castes." Maya bowed slightly. "Welcome aboard the Harmony of Worlds. I am Dr. Maya Wong. We have no hidden weapons or warriors, but you're welcome to verify this yourselves. Would you like refreshments first? We've prepared a reception to welcome you." The aliens exchanged glances, clearly unprepared for hospitality. "Deception through false comfort is a recognized tactic," Vexmore stated, though his tone held uncertainty. "Not deception, diplomacy," Maya corrected gently. "If you prefer to conduct your inspection first, we understand. Our ship's AI can guide you, or we can accompany you personally." After a brief consultation in their own clicking language, the Veltrax agreed to split their forces. 3 would inspect the ship while Vexmore and 2 others would attend this reception. As they walked through the corridors of the Harmony, Maya noted how the aliens' postures remained rigid with tension. They flinched at artwork, scrutinized passing crew members with suspicion, and kept weapons half-raised. The reception area had been transformed into a showcase of human culture. Food from all Earth regions and colonies was displayed alongside art, music, and interactive historical exhibits. The gathered diplomatic staff greeted the aliens with smiles rather than fear. "Your species shows no defensive posturing," Vexmore observed as he cautiously examined a plate of sushi. "Even your young are present in a potential combat zone." He indicated a junior cultural liaison who was barely 20. "We don't consider this a combat zone," Maya explained. "We consider it a meeting place." Without establishing dominance hierarchies, how do you determine leadership? "Through demonstrated expertise, democratic processes, and collaborative decision-making," Maya replied. "Different situations call for different leaders." The alien scales flashed with patterns Maya couldn't interpret. "And your territories? How do you defend them without warriors?" "We don't think in terms of defense. We explore, we settle uninhabited worlds, we build. There's enough universe for everyone." Before Vexmore could respond, his communication device activated. The inspection team's leader spoke rapidly in their native tongue, his tone conveying clear disbelief. "My subordinates report no weapons systems detected. No warrior quarters. No battle plans. Even your engine systems are non-standard." Vexmore's 4 eyes focused intensely on Maya. "How does your species survive?" Maya smiled and offered the alien a glass of water. "Perhaps that's the discussion we should be having, First Blade Vexmore. Not how to fight, but why neither of us needs to." As night fell over Sydney, Eleni Costas stood in her garden, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, humanity's first meeting with the Veltrax was unfolding. A species that had developed spaceflight technology comparable to Earth's, yet remained locked in warfare's ancient cycles, was confronting the possibility that there might be another way to exist. Her grandchild tugged at her sleeve. "Grandma, why are you looking at the stars? Are you worried about the aliens?" Eleni smiled and lifted the child into her arms. "No, little one. I'm not worried. I'm hopeful. Sometimes the universe sends us exactly the reminder we need." "What reminder?" Eleni pointed to the faint light of Ta Ceti, barely visible among brighter stars. That humanity's greatest strength was never in our ability to fight, she said softly. It was in our ability to grow beyond it. The encounter. First Blade Vexmore stood rigidly in the Harmony's observation deck, his scales shifting between deep purple and midnight blue as he gazed at the stars. Behind him, Dr. Maya Wong waited patiently. After 3 days aboard the human vessel, the Veltrax officer had requested this private meeting away from both his warriors and her diplomatic team. Your species confounds all established principles, he finally said, still facing the viewport. No defense systems, no warrior caste, no territorial aggression markers. He turned, his 4 eyes fixing on Maya. And yet you've colonized 12 worlds and developed technology that rivals our own. Maya nodded. Different evolutionary paths lead to different solutions. First Blade. Your culture developed through competition and conflict. Ours nearly destroyed itself that way before finding another path. You spoke of this last ward yesterday. Your historical archives confirm 2,000 cycles of peace since then. Vexmore's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Such a state is theoretical at best among the 17 species of the galactic perimeter. Perhaps because war is still viewed as inevitable, Maya suggested gently. It is inevitable. Vexmore's scales flashed crimson briefly before returning to blue. Resource competition, territorial expansion, population pressure. These forces demand combat resolution, or they demand innovation, cooperation, and mutual growth. Maya countered. When we stopped spending resources on destruction, we found we had abundance for creation. The alien warrior made a sound Maya's translator couldn't interpret, something between a scoff and a sigh. Supreme Warlord Kaz Tsek expects my report within the hour, he said. The battle fleet awaits at the edge of this system. 27 warships with enough firepower to reduce your colonies to ash. What would your people do if they attacked? Maya considered the question carefully. We would evacuate where possible, attempt communication throughout, and continue seeking peaceful resolution. We would defend our people, but not through conventional warfare. You would lose, perhaps by your metrics of victory and defeat, Maya acknowledged. But tell me, First Blade, after 20 centuries of continuous warfare, has the Veltrax dominion found lasting security? Has conquest brought contentment? Vexmore turned back to the stars, his posture shifting subtly. For the first time, Maya recognized what might be weariness in the proud warrior's stance. I have served in 16 major campaigns, he said quietly. I have earned glory for the dominion and advancement for my genetic line. This is the way of things. And if there were another way? The alien scales rippled with patterns too complex for Maya to interpret. That is not for a warrior to decide. Maya smiled. Perhaps it is exactly for warriors to decide. After all, you understand the true cost better than anyone. Supreme Warlord Kaz Tsek's image dominated the Harmony's communication screen. His scales flushed dark red as he absorbed Vexmore's report. Behind him, other Veltrax officers monitored displays on what was clearly the bridge of their flagship. You confirm they have no defensive capabilities, Kaz Tsek demanded, disbelief evident in his rumbling voice. Confirmed, Supreme Warlord. No weapons, no shields, no military hierarchy, Vexmore responded formally. And the response to our declaration? Vexmore hesitated. They found it amusing, Supreme Warlord. They laughed. The Supreme Warlord's scales flashed with patterns of rage. They mocked the sacred combat protocols. This insult cannot stand. Maya, standing beside Vexmore for the transmission, stepped forward. Supreme Warlord, if I may, we meant no disrespect. Our reaction came from cultural unfamiliarity, not contempt. Humanity has moved beyond warfare, so receiving a war declaration was unexpected. Impossible. Kaz Tsek slammed a fist against his command console. No species abandons warfare. It is the fundamental force of evolution. Yet here we stand, Maya replied calmly. 2,000 years without armed conflict between humans. We'd be honored to share how this transformation occurred, if you're interested in our history. The alien warlord's eyes narrowed. Your deception serves no purpose. First Blade, you will return to the fleet. We will proceed with combat operations as planned. Vexmore's scales dimmed slightly. Supreme Warlord, I request additional observation time. The human social structure requires further study before. Denied. Kaz-Tsek cut him off. Your prolonged exposure to these creatures has compromised your judgment. Return immediately. The transmission ended abruptly. Maya turned to Vexmore, whose posture had stiffened again. He's going to attack, isn't he? She asked quietly. It is the way of the Dominion, Vexmore confirmed, though Maya detected reluctance in his tone. I must return to the fleet. Before you go, Maya said, would you be willing to accept some gifts for your journey? Cultural artifacts that might help the Supreme Warlord better understand humanity. The Veltrax officer hesitated, then nodded once. I will convey your offerings according to the 4th protocol of enemy tribute. Maya smiled. We prefer to call it cultural exchange, but that works too. Eleni Kostas stood in Earth's central communication hub, surrounded by holographic displays showing the Veltrax fleet's approach. 27 warships had entered the solar system, moving in precise formation toward Earth. Billions of humans across the planet and colonies watched the approaching vessels with curiosity rather than panic. They've ignored all communication attempts since First Blade Vexmore returned to their fleet, reported Communications Director Sato. Eleni nodded. And the Harmony? Dr. Wong reports they're maintaining position at the designated coordinates. The Veltrax fleet will reach them in approximately 20 minutes. And our contingency measures. Dr. Kavita Sharma, Earth's leading physicist, stepped forward. The gravitic diversion system is ready. Administrator, if necessary, we can redirect their vessels without causing damage. But it's an untested application of the technology. Let's hope it remains untested, Eleni replied. Continue broadcast on all frequencies. The message remains the same. We welcome peaceful contact and request dialogue. The room fell silent as they watched the alien fleet's methodical approach. Despite 2 millennia of peace, humanity had not lost its capacity for self-defense. They had simply redefined it. The weapons of war had been abandoned, but the technologies developed for exploration, construction, and environmental management could serve protective functions if necessary. They're accelerating, Sato announced suddenly. Projected intercept with Harmony in 12 minutes. Eleni straightened her posture. Activate emergency protocol. All ships in the vicinity should withdraw to safe distance. Alert Dr. Wong. Administrator. Sato interrupted, his eyes widening at his display. The lead Veltrax vessel is breaking formation. It's slowing down. The massive holographic display showed the Veltrax flagship separating from the fleet, its trajectory altering as it decelerated. Moments later, a communication request flashed across Sato's console. They're hailing us, he said, surprise evident in his voice. Accept, Eleni ordered, straightening her simple formal attire. The image of Supreme Warlord Kaz-Tsek appeared, his posture notably less rigid than in previous communications. Behind him stood First Blade Vexmore. Administrator Kostas, the warlord began, his translator conveying a tone of formal respect. I request clarification on materials provided by First Blade Vexmore. Eleni raised an eyebrow. Of course, Supreme Warlord. What would you like clarified? These historical records, Kaz-Tsek gestured, and a display behind him showed footage from Earth's last war. The devastating conflict that had finally convinced humanity to abandon warfare 2 millennia earlier. Your species came to the brink of extinction through warfare, yet survived without evolving combat superiority. This contradicts all known evolutionary patterns. We evolved something else instead, Eleni explained. We call it collective wisdom. We recognized that our technological development had outpaced our social development, making warfare an existential threat rather than an evolutionary advantage. The alien leader's scales shifted to a contemplative blue-green. The concept is alien to us, yet the historical evidence is compelling. Vexmore stepped forward. Supreme Warlord, I believe the humans represent an evolutionary branch we have not encountered before. Their technological achievements confirm the possibility of advancement without continuous warfare. Kaztsek's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. The sacred combat protocols make no provision for engagement with a post-warfare species. Eleni smiled. Perhaps this is an opportunity to write new protocols. Supreme Warlord, we would welcome cultural exchange rather than combat. There is much our species could learn from each other. A tense silence followed as the alien leader appeared to consider this proposal. Finally, his scales settled into a steady pattern of deep blue. The 16th Dominion expansion can accommodate adjustments for exceptional circumstances, he said carefully. I propose a formal meeting between our leadership castes to establish parameters for non-combat interaction. Relief flooded the command center, though no one allowed it to show on their faces. Eleni maintained her diplomatic composure. We would be honored. Supreme Warlord, we can prepare a suitable venue at Earth Central or aboard our diplomatic vessel, whichever you would prefer. Neutral territory would be appropriate, Kaztsek responded. The orbital position between your 3rd and 4th planets would satisfy ceremonial requirements. We can arrange that, Eleni agreed. Shall we say 3 Earth days from now? That would give both sides adequate time for preparation. The alien leader nodded, a gesture he had clearly adopted from his interaction with humans. Acceptable. We will maintain position and await coordinates. As the transmission ended, spontaneous applause broke out across the command center. Eleni raised her hands for quiet. This is just the beginning, she cautioned. We've averted immediate conflict, but establishing meaningful understanding with a species so fundamentally different from us will take time and patience. But they laughed, Sato said with a grin. They declared war, and humanity's response was to laugh and invite them to dinner. That has to count for something. Eleni allowed herself a small smile. Indeed it does. Inform Dr. Wong her team will be coordinating the diplomatic reception. And someone please contact the Mars Museum of Ancient Warfare. We might need to borrow some exhibits for cultural context. 3 weeks later, Maya stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned Concordia station, watching as human and Veltrax delegates mingled in the large central chamber below. The orbital facility, hastily constructed in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, represented the first formal neutral ground between the species. Supreme Warlord Kaztek and his command staff stood in conversation with Administrator Kostis and representatives from the colonies. Initial stiffness had given way to what appeared to be genuine curiosity on both sides. They're discussing trade possibilities, commented First Blade Vexmore, who had joined Maya at the viewport. His scales now regularly display patterns of blue and green rather than the aggressive purples and reds of their first meeting. Minerals for technology, Maya guessed. Among other exchanges, Vexmore confirmed. The Supreme Warlord is particularly interested in your environmental restoration techniques. Many worlds in the Dominion bear scars from centuries of combat. Maya nodded, and we're fascinated by your propulsion systems. Different priorities led to different innovations. Below them, a Veltrax cultural officer was demonstrating combat forms to a group of fascinated human children. The movement slowed and softened for their benefit. Nearby, human artists were teaching Veltrax observers the basics of collaborative sculpture. The Warrior Case Council will not easily accept these changes, Vexmore said quietly. 3 millennia of tradition do not shift in a single season. Neither did ours, Maya acknowledged. Earth's transition away from warfare took generations. There were setbacks, resistance, conflicts resolved without violence, but not without pain. Yet you persisted. We had no choice. Our weapons had become too powerful, our planet too fragile. Evolution demanded we adapt or perish. Vexmore's scales rippled thoughtfully. Perhaps the Dominion faces similar evolutionary pressure. Our expansion has encountered natural limits. Resources grow scarce despite conquest. The ancient ways may no longer serve. Maya smiled. As a scientist, I found that the most successful species aren't those with the sharpest claws or strongest armor, but those most adaptable to change. A controversial perspective among the Veltrax, Vexmore noted, though his tone held no disapproval, but one worthy of consideration. Below them, Kaztek had moved to the center of the chamber. The universal translator amplified his voice as he addressed the gathered delegates. For 20 generations, the Veltrax dominion has expanded through strength of arms and adherence to the sacred combat protocols. He began formally. Today, we acknowledge a new path forward, not through the abandonment of our traditions, but through their evolution. A ripple of approval passed through both human and Veltrax attendees. The humans have demonstrated that advancement need not come through conquest alone. Kaztek continued. While the warrior path remains honored among the Veltrax, we recognize the value in diversity of approach. Therefore, I am establishing the first cultural exchange caste within the Dominion hierarchy. Maya glanced at Vexmore, whose scales displayed patterns she now recognized as surprise. First Blade Vexmore will lead this new caste, Kaztek announced, with the rank of High Ambassador. His first mission will be the establishment of permanent diplomatic relations with humanity. The first Blade scales flushed with patterns of honor recognition, a reaction Maya had learned to identify during their weeks of interaction. It appears you've been promoted, she said with a smile. Reassigned, Vexmore corrected, though his tone held something like satisfaction. The Supreme Warlord is wiser than many give him credit for. He recognizes that the Dominion must adapt to survive. Below them, human and Veltrax representatives had begun formalizing the first non-aggression pact in Dominion history, not a surrender, but a mutual recognition of boundaries and opportunities. Do you think it will last? Maya asked quietly. Vexmore considered the question, his gaze taking in the unprecedented gathering below. The old ways are deeply ingrained. There will be resistance, setbacks, perhaps even conflicts resolved without full warfare, but not without struggle. Yet you'll persist. Maya echoed his earlier words. The Veltrax officer's scales settled into a pattern of calm determination that needed no translation. We have little choice, he said. Evolution demands we adapt. And your people have provided a compelling demonstration that there are alternatives to extinction. Maya smiled and turned back to the viewport, watching as the Earth rose slowly into view beyond the station. For 2,000 years, humanity had faced the stars without weapons, trusting that intelligence would ultimately recognize intelligence, that life would value life. Today, that trust had been validated, not through force of arms, but through the simple, bewildering power of saying no to war and laughing at its declaration.